The night was colder than usual, and the streets of the little town were empty, silent except for the wind moving through the trees. Daniel walked home from his late shift at the diner, his shoes echoing softly on the cracked pavement. His uniform smelled faintly of fried food, and his backpack, old, torn at the edges, hung loosely over one shoulder. Inside it were nothing but a few notebooks filled with sketches, half-written plans and messy notes. He had almost no money in his pocket. But in his chest, beating restlessly, was a heart full of impossible dreams. Daniel had grown up in this town, a place where people believed in simple, predictable lives. Work in the factory, buy a small house, start a family, grow old, and never ever ask for more. That was the rhythm of life here. But Daniel was different. He could never silence the voice inside him that kept whispering, "There's something bigger out there. You're meant for more than this." When he was a boy, he used to stand on the roof of his parents' house and stare at the stars, imagining himself building things the world had never seen. Machines, businesses, ideas that would travel farther than he ever could. But life hadn't given him much. His father, a construction worker with rough, calloused hands, often told him, "Dreams are good, son, but dreams don't pay the bills." His mother, gentle but tired, worked long hours as a cleaner. They loved him, but they never understood him. Every night after finishing work, Daniel would sit in his tiny apartment. The wallpaper peeled from the corners, the heater barely worked, and the street outside was loud with passing cars. Yet none of that mattered. He would place his notebooks on the small wooden table and write. Business ideas, inventions, motivational quotes he made up to keep himself going. On the first page of every notebook, he wrote the same words, "One day I'll make it out of here." But the world seemed determined to prove him wrong. His friends laughed at him. "Man, you're wasting your time," they'd say. "You'll be stuck here just like the rest of us." Sometimes, their words hit him, harder than he liked to admit. He would sit on the edge of his bed at night and wonder, what if they're right? What if I'm just a fool chasing shadows? One evening, as Daniel walked home, he noticed an old man sitting on a bench outside a closed bookstore. The store's sign was faded, its windows covered in dust. Yet the old man's eyes were sharp, almost glowing as he stared at the empty building. Curious, Daniel stopped. "Are you all right, sir?" he asked. The old man smiled faintly. "I'm fine. Just remembering. This used to be mine, you know. Once this bookstore was alive. People came here searching for hope, for knowledge, for something beyond themselves." Daniel sat down beside him. "What happened?" The old man sighed. "Times got hard. People stopped reading as much. Bills piled up. I lost it all, but—" He paused, his voice softening. "What matters is not what you lose, but what you dare to create. Creation, that's how we touch eternity." Those words pierced Daniel like lightning. That night, instead of scribbling random thoughts, he began writing a real plan. His very first business idea. He would start small, selling used books online. He scraped together his savings, barely enough to buy a handful of second-hand books. At first, nothing happened. Days passed, no orders. He wanted to quit. Maybe my friends were right. Maybe I'll never make it. Then one night his phone buzzed. His first sale. Just one book. But to Daniel, it felt like the universe had whispered back, "Keep going." He wrapped the book carefully, wrote a thank you note in neat handwriting. "Thank you for supporting my dream. I hope this book inspires you." Orders trickled in. One became two. Two became 10. Slowly, steadily, his little online shop grew. Daniel worked double shifts at the diner, came home exhausted, and still stayed up past midnight to manage his store. He slept only a few hours, but his soul was alive in a way it had never been before. The same friends who once mocked him began asking for advice. Even his father, though still doubtful, started noticing his persistence. One afternoon, Daniel walked past the old bookstore again. The old man was there as always. Daniel sat beside him and handed him an envelope. "What's this?" the man asked. "A partnership offer," Daniel said with a grin. "I want to reopen your store. Not just as a bookstore, as a community space for dreamers, writers, thinkers, a place where people can believe again." The old man's hands trembled as he opened the letter. Tears filled his eyes. "You're bringing life back to something I thought was gone forever." The grand reopening was small but magical. Families came. Children ran between the aisles. Shelves were filled once again with stories waiting to be discovered. Daniel stood behind the counter watching people smile, and for the first time in